Hey everybody, I'm Brian Goulet of GouletPens.com, and it's time for another episode of Goulet Q&A. This is the 43rd episode, and it's kind of a podcast style video here if you've never seen it before. I just get all kinds of questions about pens, and I answer them. It's really a pretty straightforward deal. So I'll give a little recap on some of the stuff I've had going on in the past week. This video is posting August 8th of 2014. It's been a very busy August so far here around the Goulet shop. We've had a lot of internal stuff going on, so a lot of moving people around, hiring some folks, expanding our team. We're going to be 27 people here pretty soon at Goulet, so it's crazy. We're becoming more of a crowd and less of a group. So it's really exciting. We're still growing, still doing a lot of cool stuff. So the only consequence of all this hiring and growth stuff that we've been doing is I've had less time to be shooting videos, putting stuff out. So I apologize for that. One of the positions we've just hired for is a full-time videographer. So our video production will be stepping up a notch here in a little bit. It may take a little while to kind of find our groove, but trust me, we're moving in that direction, doing good things. It's not going to be permanent like this. So anyway, I'm still able to do Q&A, so that's kind of cool. We've had two new customer care folks start on our team, Anna and Margaret. Their bios are not up on our website yet, and I apologize for that. Our photographer's out this week, and we got to get write-ups on them. So they just started on Wednesday. So it's we'll get them up on the website pretty soon. So, but they're really exciting. A lot of good stuff. A lot of good people we have. Internally, we've kind of moved people around. Drew was our shipping manager. He's now moving into our customer care manager role. So he's kind of moving to a little more forward-facing. You might have seen Drew before. He was in the Noodler's heat setting video. He's been with us for over 3 years, so he's seen a lot of the change and growth. He was back working with us in our garage, so he's seen a lot happen over the years. And then Adam has come up out of our warehouse into the what we're calling the fulfillment manager now instead of shipping manager. So he's now fulfillment manager. So got a lot of good stuff. We're trying to build up leadership, do more kind of leadership development around here. That's all stuff that you maybe don't see. It's all kind of behind the scenes stuff. It's not the same as me shooting a video, getting that stuff out to you, but it's still extremely critical stuff to continue to grow our business and keep it with that same personal feel that we've always had. A lot of behind the scenes stuff happens in order to continue to offer that for you. So even though we're growing, even though we're getting bigger, we are absolutely focused on still maintaining that same kind of small feel that we've always had. So that said, what else we got going on? The DC Pen Show is happening this weekend. We're not real big into the pen show circuit. Rachel and I are going just to the DC show. That's the only show we've gone to. We're not like show goers, you know. It's totally cool for those like retailers and stuff that do that. That's great. It's really more of a vintage focus anyway. It's still a cool show though, and it's kind of right in our backyard. It's just a couple hours up the road in DC. We're down in Richmond, Virginia, just outside. And Rachel's family lives in the DC area, so we're able to go. They watch our kids. We can go to the show. It's really kind of like the only thing that we can actually manage. But we're not to get in a booth or anything. I know sometimes we've gotten questions about that, like why don't we set up a booth? And we've considered it. We did it once in 2010. I've got some old videos on that if you want to go look at it. It was just crazy setting all that up. And that was even before we had Noodler's ink and stuff like that. It was a while ago. We didn't even sell pens back then. So it was just crazy to think what life was like back then for us around here. But it was a lot of work even back then. And now we have 3,000 products, and I don't even know how we would possibly think of what to bring to that show. So we're just attending. We're just gonna go meet and greet people and just say hi, shake people's hands, meet people face to face. You get to see how large I actually am in person. But my voice might sound a little funny to you too. I think I'm coming down with something, a little throat thing. It doesn't hurt or anything, but I've got this kind of like deep voice that I don't normally have. Anyway. And then the one other thing I wanted to touch on is this week, one video that I was able to post was the top 5 fountain pens for newbies. And it's stirred up a little bit of discussion, a little bit of controversy, I guess. That wasn't really my intention. It was purely an opinion-based thing. But, I've had some folks on my blog or on Reddit and stuff like that have said that I was like way off the mark, or that I had too much of a focus on, cheap pens and stuff like that, and that it wasn't the best introduction for newbies. And, I can totally understand where you're coming from. I can make that same argument against myself. And I took all this stuff into consideration when I chose my top 5. and again, it's like not this timeless top 5 of all time. This is just like where I am right now, where my business is, and the customers that I've interacted with. Those are the 5 that I typically recommend for a variety of factors. And you can go and look at like a 12-minute video where I cover all the different features of the pen. I chose the pens I did for pretty specific reasons, but I think the main argument was that some of the pens that I chose were kind of inexpensive, and that those may not be the best representation of what fountain pens are really like. Other recommendations were for more expensive pens in the $40, $50 range that were maybe a little more solid, a little more reliable, or whatever you want to call it, that would be kind of a better introduction in a pen moving forward. I mean, and I can totally see that argument, but my logic where I was coming from, like when I started out with fountain pens, I was all into sub $20 pens, and there's not a ton of them out there. I was really into the Pelikan Script, which I don't even carry anymore, a Platinum Preppy, and like the original Noodler's Nib Creeper pen before the Nib Creeper was a flex nib. It was a standard nib, so it was just a $14 flex nib. Like that was kind of my foray, and I had other pens like, I think I had the Lamy Safari and like some of those other ones, but there was a while there where I was like only into really inexpensive pens. And for me, they wrote well. I could get a bunch of them and use all different kinds of ink. I was all about the ink first thing. For the first almost year of gouletpens.com, we didn't actually sell pens, because I had come off of making my own pens. And then we started carrying paper and ink to accompany those pens I was making. And then once I stopped making pens, we were still carrying paper and ink, but there was so much to go on and talk about with paper and ink that there was a period of almost a year where we didn't carry any pens at all. So it's really funny to think now, it's like the Goulet Pen Company, gouletpens.com, we didn't sell any pens. So interesting part of our little history there. But I have very much of an affinity for these, what I call value pens. I don't like the word cheap because I don't like to think that I carry cheap stuff. It's value stuff, it's inexpensive. But you get a good bang for your buck. And I'm straight utilitarian. I'm all about bang for the buck. Even if it's an expensive pen, I still like it to be a good value. You know what I mean? So anyway, that's kind of why I chose what I did. And honestly, if I had chosen more expensive pens, like TWSBI 580, somebody threw that out there, or like the Schaefer 100 and like stuff like that, $40, $50 pens, I can guarantee you if I'd chosen more expensive pens like that, there would have been a whole slew of people that could argue like, oh, you're just trying to sell more expensive pens. There's so many great inexpensive pens that people could get into. So it's like, there's really, I can't please everybody, but that's why I called the post, Brian's top 5 favorite pens for newbies. Because like, I put my name on it and I own it and I say, these are my opinion, my five favorite pens for newbies of what I might recommend. But there's certainly plenty of other great pens out there, and anyone who has an opinion is just as welcome to have their opinion as I have mine. So I do appreciate the good feedback, though. It's generated a lot of good discussion. But anyway, I've talked about that long enough. I got a lot of good questions that have come in this week, and I guess I should just go ahead and get to it. So here we go. First one I have is from Ryan G on Ink Nouveau. So the school year is coming up, and I'm armed with a new Lamy Vista and some PR Electric D.C. blue. Amazing pen and ink, by the way. That was his saying, not mine. Do you have any suggestions for some fountain pen friendly notebooks, preferably 8.5 by 11 or similar size, lined? I take lots of notes and I really need something that can keep up with my fountain pen. Okay, well, when you're looking for back to school stuff, I've actually got on my agenda to come out with a video of, back to school notebooks. I've already got some like back to school pens for students, whatever, that I put out last year actually, and maybe I'll resurface that. It's a Fountain Pen 101, Fountain Pens for Students. Check that out. But for notebooks specifically, if you're using fountain pens, the typical like Mead 5-star type stuff that is very common around here in the US, that stuff it does okay, but it's pretty absorbent, and definitely if you're using a fountain pen, you're not going to be able to use both sides of the page because it's going to bleed through and stuff like that. So, the price can be a little misleading of notebooks if you're using fountain pens. If you want to get something that's definitely not going to bleed through at all, you usually have to pay a little bit more, but when you pay a little bit more, you get better paper, it doesn't bleed through, you can use both sides of the page, you know, it kind of evens itself out, or at least gets a little bit closer to an even price. So you're asking me about an 8.5 by 11 size, and the first thing I want to say is most of the paper that is decent for fountain pens comes from outside the US, just because we do not have a fountain pen culture here in the US. We have a very disposable culture, ballpoints, roller balls, that kind of stuff. Fountain pens are kind of an afterthought. More of a 50, 60-year-old kind of concept in the US. So most of the good paper is going to come out of Japan or come out of Europe. So that said, they do not have the same standard sizes that we have in the US, because we're in the US and we've got to be different, right? So 8.5 by 11 is an American standard size, and it is not the same as what they have in Europe and Japan. So there is there is one 8.5 by 11 notebook that I have in my entire shop, right? It's the Clairefontaine C8267. Okay, look up that product code. It's an 8.5 by 11. It's a big, thick notebook, perforated, 3-hole punched, side wire bound. That is by far, like far and away, the best like student notebook that I have. Okay, it's pretty good price for what it is. It's more than twice as thick as most of the other notebooks, so it seems really expensive. I think it's $12. Should look that up, but check that out. That's definitely the number one, especially because of that 3-hole punch thing. Aside from that, I know you asked me about lined ones. I've got a few lined recommendations, but I pulled some numbers and I saw, you know, what we sold around this time last year. You know, right now everybody's kind of gearing up for back to school, so I went and pulled some numbers and just saw what was most popular around this time last year. Because, you know, when it comes to notebooks, there's a lot of different preferences and stuff. I will say that side wire-bound notebooks are by far the most popular format for students because they're the most economical. And generally, they're a good format to use in a school setting because you can kind of fold it over. You don't have to, you know, fold it open, because an 8.5 by 11 open is way too big for most desks. So having the wire-bound allows you to kind of fold it back over on itself, and it's really, really practical. So that said, the most popular was actually the Clairefontaine C69-741, which is an A5 size, so it's a little bit smaller French rule notebook. The C68-141 is a French rule A4. That one's next. These are all far and away after that C8267, the big, thick 3-hole punch one. C68-142 is a graph A4, and then the lined version of that is next, C63-125. So actually lined is not necessarily the most popular, believe it or not. And then we've got the C81-55, which is actually a top wire-bound A4 lined. That one is pretty popular as well. And then after that, the C69-145, which is a cloth-bound lined A4 size. So A4 is similar enough. It's not quite the same. It's 8 1/4 by 11 3/4, so it's a 1/4 inch off of that 8.5 by 11. So it's going to be a little bit narrower, a little bit taller, but it's still going to be, you know, fairly close to American size. Then of course you've got Rhodia pads, number 18 pads, number 19 pads. Number 19 is a little bit longer than the 18. Those are good options. Definitely got lined rulings on those. And then the Rhodia side wire bounds too. Those are actually pretty popular for student notebooks as well. So I'll narrow down the selection a little bit more maybe for the next video I do, but those are some pretty good options for you to choose there for back to school stuff. All right, Analise A on Facebook. Oh, I kind of already answered this. Why don't you guys have a table at the DC Pen Show? Okay, sorry, Analise, I kind of answered this before I even did the question. So I think I pretty much covered everything before, but basically we did the show. We discovered the pen show in 2009. That's where we went. I didn't know anything about fountain pens, and I went there and had kind of a epiphany, like, I need to learn about fountain pens. So I went on Fountain Pen Network, started tearing it up, started getting products, linked up with Exoclair, started carrying some paper and ink and stuff like that. Really tried to learn the ins and outs of fountain pens. But we attended the show in 2010, Rachel and I did. It was a lot of work, And it was very disruptive to the online portion of our business, even back then when it was way, way less intense than it is now. It was just way too much. We took a lot of inventory to the show, and then just all the work and the time and packing it all up and taking it all back, and stuff would get knocked around and bent and shelf worn and stuff like that. But then even still, we were like had the site up while we were at the show, and so people were buying stuff online that we may have had at the show, and just that inventory getting off, and it was really crazy. So it's definitely, like, even now especially, it's not something that we can logistically manage. It's just not possible unless we like bought a separate set of inventory just to take to the show, and then we could like merge it back in after we get back. But even still, just deciding what to take to the show and working it, like, I personally would rather just go to the show and just attend and get to walk around and talk to everybody that I want to. Because that's another thing is, like, it's great getting to talk to people at the show, but when you're transacting, you're not really talking, you're transacting. You're taking methods of payment, and you're talking about, getting people change, and you're, doing all these logistical transactional things related to buying the products. You're not really getting to talk about the stuff as much as you would like. So, working the show is very different than attending the show. So I like attending the show, so that's what I'm going to do. Mad respect to everybody that does shows regularly. I know there's definitely like a whole like following of people that do that. There's this whole like group that really just does that and like kind of goes around all the country, and they all see each other at the shows and have a good time. It's great stuff. It's just not for me. All right, Peter C on Facebook. Is there such a thing as breaking in the nib or the pen, or is that more of a myth? That's a really good question. Really good. And the answer is kind of yes and no, right? So in a way, yeah, you can break in a nib, right? So there is something real to that. I've been using fountain pens for long enough now where I have, just through my own usage of them, broken in some nibs. I talk about my Pilot Custom 74 a lot. Love that pen. I've used it extensively over the years, and I just love the way the pen feels. And it definitely writes a little bit different now than a brand new Custom 74 that comes out of the box. Mainly because I have kind of a heavy hand. That nib is 14 karat, and over time I've kind of bent it a little bit and broken it in. It's got a nice softness to it, and it writes a little bit wetter now because I've used it so much. Not to the point where it's caused any kind of problem, whatever. It's just, over time I have written with it with a heavier hand, and now I don't write with it as a heavy a hand because it writes wetter as I like it. So part of it is breaking in the pen, but I think it's way like overemphasized how much these pens might actually break in, or these nibs. There are definitely like some people out there that I've read and heard that tout like you don't ever want to hand anyone else a pen and even have them sign their name with it because it's so personal to you that it writes to, it conforms to the specific handwriting style that you have, and if anybody else writes with it, even for their signature, it's going to ruin it and all this stuff. And, I think there is a concept to that is getting misconstrued there. If you are handing your pen to somebody that has no idea how to write with a fountain pen, and they do crazy stuff with it and press way too hard and have the angle way off, and they just like bend that nib all to heck, yeah, they can ruin the pen. Like, that's a very real thing that can happen. So you never want to just hand your favorite pen over to somebody, not giving them any instruction whatsoever, and just let them do whatever they want. So like for me, half the time when I hand somebody a pen for the first time, they don't even know what to do with it. They like flip it upside down, and they're trying to write the nib upside down. I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. Why don't you just go ahead and flip that thing over and write with it, that way? And I'm very kind in that way, but there's honestly just not that many people, just strangers and stuff that I meet, that are that familiar with how to actually use a fountain pen. So yeah, there's definitely some legitimacy to like, don't just hand your pen over to anybody with no instruction whatsoever. But the idea that anybody writing with your pen will mess it up in, this much of a length of writing is just not true. I mean, think about it. These pens have metal nibs, stainless steel or gold, that will withstand years and years of writing while holding up. How is it conforming that quickly to your writing style, and then it could be undone that quickly by someone else, but still hold up for years and years? You know what I mean? Like, it's the nibs are not that sensitive. I honestly believe that we conform to our pens as much as they conform to our handwriting. So yeah, like over time, a nib is going to like get more flexible and stuff just as it's been used. Maybe flexible is the wrong word. It's going to get a little bit softer. It's going to, you know, bend a little bit as you're writing with it with a heavy hand, long period of time. The tipping on the nib itself may get a little bit smoother just because the friction of writing on the paper over an extended period of time will smooth out the nib just through friction. But it's not going to happen all that quickly. So typically with pens like the Lamy 2000, for example, I've got that pen here. That is a perfect example because this pen has got kind of a fine sweet spot on it. And some people just cannot get the hang of this thing. And it frustrates a lot of people because a lot of people rant and rave about this pen. Maybe not rant and rave. A lot of people rave about the pen. Well, I guess people are ranting. But anyway, a lot of people rave about this pen, and then some people get it with high expectations, and they just cannot get the hang of writing with this pen, and they send it back, and they just don't want anything to do with it. Okay, that's fair. But definitely a pen like this, it is going to write how it writes, and you have to figure out how to hold it and how to do it in the right way. And then once you adapt to the pen, it's going to write great for you. But that pen is not going to adapt to you nearly as quickly as you will adapt to it. So, that said, I've been saying that a lot today, that said. Anyway, hopefully that answers your question, Peter. All right, Josh P. on Facebook says, a question for Q&A. I have heard the benefits of micromesh and mylar paper and how to use them from your videos. However, I always hear about the possibility of ruining the pen from many individuals. I want to know what I should avoid when using mylar or micromesh. What are the dire mistakes I should avoid when using it? Thanks, Brian. It's really not as scary as it sounds. Probably the ones who are giving you a lot of caution are doing it because maybe they've had a bad experience themselves, or they just want to really be clear about the risk that's out there. But keep in mind, I would not sell these products if I felt that there was a distinct chance that you could be ruining stuff. I give adequate disclaimers and all that, and I say like you're messing with your own nib, you're voiding your warranty when you do this. Like, please be aware of that and understand that and take responsibility for that. So that's fine. But in order to actually ruin your pen through something as relatively gentle as mylar, a little bit more aggressive is the micromesh, but it's 12,000 grit micromesh. You can certainly get coarser grits, which are more aggressive, that you may use more in like a regrinding type situation, but that is not what I'm talking about. I don't sell any of that type of stuff. It's really just for honing that nib, smoothing it out a little bit. Even the micromesh, which is the more aggressive one, in order to actually ruin it, there's basically two things that you would do. The first one would be if you have the tines of your nib, so if you're looking straight at the nib, right? So take the nib and point it like you're going to stab yourself in the eye, right? But don't actually stab yourself in the eye. That's a key part of this whole thing. Don't stab yourself in the eye. But anyway, if you're looking straight at your nib, you're going to see, basically this. So you've got your tipping material. Maybe I'll do it like this. You got your tipping material, you've got one tine, and you've got the other tine, and you've got a slit that's cut straight down the middle. If you have a misalignment of those tines, which means that one of those tines is dropped below the other, that's going to cause it to feel scratchy because that tine is going to kind of scrape on the page as you're writing with it. And usually you're going to feel that in one direction and not the other because, the tip is rounded. And so when you're writing in this way, it's going to write fine because it's got that rounded part. And you're writing the other way, this is going to be sharper and it's going to feel scratchier. So if you go and you take this thing to micromesh and you start doing figure eights and start grinding away that one tine, then the other one is it's going to eventually get ground away to the point where, whatever, I don't know how to use my hand, put my hands in that motion, but, it's going to grind away to the point where you don't have a proper alignment and your tines get all screwed up. That's one way that you can mess it up. And then what happens is the capillary action starts to get affected because you don't have enough of a tipping stuff on there. That's one way to do it. So the first thing you always want to do is check the alignment of your tines, because that alone may be enough to fix a kind of a scratchy nib, which is usually, that's kind of what I recommend for the micromesh, is when you have a noticeable scratch on the feel of the nib and you're trying to get that scratchy feeling out. The mylar is really more for taking a nib that already feels pretty smooth and making it really smooth. The mylar is not so much for fixing a scratchy nib because it's not aggressive enough. If you feel it, it feels almost like leather because it's so relatively smooth, right? It's very, very like microscopic. It's like 0.3 micron or something. It's crazy how small the abrasives are on that paper. Anyway, so that's one thing, is checking to make sure your tines are aligned, okay? So what you would do is you would bend up one to the point where they're aligned again, and then you try writing with it, you know, using a loop, something like this. I just happen to have all this stuff right here. I swear I didn't even plan that. Taking a loop, something, you know, looking at your pen like that, checking the alignment of the tines, and then making sure that they're aligned before you start doing anything to smooth it out. That is key. The other thing that you can do is just flat out overdoing it, right? So if you are just doing figure eights and circles and just scratching back and forth and just way overdoing it, then that could also ruin your nib. Beyond that, it's really tough to do too much damage with either of these things, and you really kind of have to do it a lot. I guess if you're like, you know, have your pen over rotated in your hand and you're doing crazy stuff like that, you could ruin it too. But I honestly have had so few people that have caused any damage to their pens whatsoever using these that it's barely even a concern. So as long as you're cautious and you're aware of what you're doing when you do it, you're probably not going to cause any harm to your pens. But even still, you're responsible for it, so make sure you are watching out, okay? Don't come yell at me in case something happens. Okay. All right. Otter on Ink Nouveau said, I have a TWSBI Classic which I bought from you and would like to know if they'll come out with swappable nibs for it. Way back in February, I wrote to TWSBI and asked about replacement nibs, and they said it was still in production, so it would be a couple of months before they had the nibs. I wrote Philip Wang again in June to find out the status, but got no reply. Do you have any insights as to when the replacement nibs might be offered? I haven't heard anything about it. I believe you can use the TWSBI mini nibs on the TWSBI Classic. I'm pretty sure that's the case. So that might be a workaround for you in the meantime. But yeah, the grip is going to be different on that, so it would be just the nib unit. But you know, I don't know when they're going to be coming out with that. I don't have any more information than you do, unfortunately. Yeah, that's about it. I'm sorry. I don't have any more information than that. All right, Mark on Ink Nouveau. Hey Brian, just a thought on the problem of too many questions for these videos. Talking about Q&A. I have had kind of a problem recently of not being able to answer nearly as many questions as I'm getting in, which is a good problem. Maybe you could create a running collection of the questions that you've answered in these videos. I know that there have been times that I wanted to find a specific clip from a specific video that I'd seen, but had to go back and scroll through a lot of past Q&As to find it. If there was some complete collection of the questions asked, sorted by category, it would make it easier to find those specific videos and might reduce the questions that have already been answered. Topics might be along the lines of nibs, inks, adjustment, repairs, Goulet pen company, blah, 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 blah. So yeah, okay, to summarize everything you're talking about here, Mark, yeah, this has definitely been an issue over time. You know, this is the 43rd Q&A that I have here, and I'm just guessing I've done an average of 15 questions per Q&A, which over 43 would be something like 645 different questions. So yes, it's absolutely true that it's becoming a bit of a bear to search for questions that have been answered in the past. I even have a hard time keeping track of that, and I'm the one talking about them. So I honestly don't have an answer for that right now. Right now we host our blog on Blogger, and Blogger's search function is not that great, and the way that you can organize things on the blog template is not great. Not super in love with Blogger. I moved to it 5 years ago, and I've kind of built up on it, and you know, moving it would be a bit of a bear, but I would be open to that in the future, exploring it, I guess. But there's just not a lot I can do with it. Even if I was to categorize, even if I was to categorize it and do all these different topics and stuff. Not only would I have to like go through and manually assign, but there's no way to like tag individual questions and make them searchable and stuff like that on the blog. So I would literally have to just take and kind of like organize all the questions. And even then, if I had, say, one running page that had all the questions broken down kind of by topic, boy, that would be a lot of questions still, 645 or more. And then every time I add a question, I would literally have to go through and like think through each question and figure out which group it would fit under best. And there's definitely a lot of questions that like it could fit under pens, it could fit under ink, it could fit under troubleshooting, it could fit under shopping. Like, I don't know, there's a lot of different categories that it crosses over into. So definitely, like in the future, doing something like setting up a better searchable thing where I can tag individual questions with like meta tags and then have like by brand and by topic and stuff like that. That would be the best way to do it. I don't currently have that functionality through Blogger to be able to do that. I don't know, but if any of you are blog gurus out there and you have recommendations for me, hey, I'm all ears. Shoot me an email, gouletqa@gouletpens.com. I'd love to hear it. All right, Enrique V on Facebook. What's your favorite 1.1 stub nib for a first-time user, considering Monteverdes and Lamys so far? Yeah, Monteverde and Lamy, solid 1.1 nibs. I like Lamys just a little bit better than Monteverdes as a first-time user, mainly just because most of Lamy's pens are a little bit in the more affordable range. So, you know, I don't want to be like, you know, saying that if you're a first-time user, you have to get a less expensive pen, but, you know, it usually makes it a little more accessible. So Lamy's got a solid reputation for pens like the Safari, the All-Star, and Vista, and stuff like that. They're they have a 1.1, also a 1.5 and 1.9, and you can swap out those nibs pretty easily and whatnot. So those I like. Monteverde's nibs are pretty solid too, as well. So, you know, but those pens, the less expensive Monteverdes are going to be in the $40, $50 range, and then they're going to kind of go up from there. So, you know, that's more of a consideration. Less to do with the nib, more to do with the whole pen. But you know, TWSBI is another contender as well. They don't have 1.1 nibs available on all their pens, so it's a little bit harder for me to recommend that as a first-time user. But I know there's a popular for new folks as well. Also, if you like the Noodler's pens, you like to mess around with the flex thing, you can put a Monteverde nib or an Edison nib or a Goulet nib on an Ahab or a Conrad, and that would be another option for you. That probably is a little more complicated route to go for a new fountain pen user, but a lot of new people like to get those Noodler's pens because they are so affordable and you don't have to get converters and all this other stuff to go with it. So also, you know, I'm going to throw it out there. The Pilot Parallel is inexpensive. It's definitely kind of a different pen. So, you know, you'll have to use it. Look at that. I have parallels here too. How do you like that? I just have like all this stuff at the ready here. You see, you don't see how the sausage is made here on Q&A, but I've spent like 2 hours in my office this week. So I've got like all this stuff just strewn like right on the edges outside of the frame of the camera here. Anyway, so Pilot Parallel, there's 4 different sizes, but the 1.5, so this doesn't really quite fit into your original question, but they've got a 1.5. Very affordable pen though, really kind of neat. Comes with, you know, cartridges and stuff like that to get started. So very cool pen though, very different though. All right, Vicki N on Facebook. You say the Jinhao X750 takes a number 6 nib. Will it work with the Noodler's flex nibs as well, or is the feed not juicy enough to support flex nib writing? Technically, yeah, the Noodler's flex nib is number 6. The Jinhao X750 and X450 and the 159 actually are all number 6. Yes, the nib will fit in the pen, usually, without too much fuss. You know, I have had some folks that have had a little bit of a harder time fitting some of the, not the flex nibs, but the regular standard Noodler's non-flex nibs, having a hard time fitting those in the Jinhao pens just because it seems that the metal on those Noodler's nibs are ever so slightly thicker than the Jinhao ones, so they're a bit of a tight squeeze to get in there. It can be done, definitely, but it is a little bit more of a tight squeeze. But anyway, but you're talking about the flex nibs. You'll be able to use it, but you won't be able to full-on flex it out. Like, there's a reason why Noodlers uses an ebonite feed because that helps the flow. There's a reason why the feed on that ebonite feed has this big bat channel that's cut through it to get maximum ink delivery to that flex nib. That flex nib is a thirsty son of a gun, and if you don't have the feed to keep up with it, it's pretty much pointless to have that nib in there because you're going to be just railroading all over the place, and you're not going to have enough ink to support the flow of the flex nib. So yeah, it'll fit in there, but it's really not going to be that ideal. But I can see why you'd be asking that now, because Noodlers does have the new flex nib that's available apart from the pen, whereas in the past it always had to come on a pen. So that's a great question, but I've not had a lot of people that have had vast success with that. All right, from Facebook, forgive me, I do not know your name because I do not read characters. Pretty sure you've asked me a lot of questions before, and I never know your name, and I apologize. But can I use ammonia to clean out Bay State Blue, or will it explode or something? It's not going to explode. Ammonia basically just doesn't really do anything for Bay State Blue. What you're going to want to use, though, instead is bleach. Bleach will cut through Bay State Blue. It's really good. Don't want to use straight bleach. That's too aggressive. And you know, if you're using bleach in any significant dilution, you want to take like as many metal parts out of the pen as possible. You know, if you are diluting bleach like 10% into 90% water, and you're just like flushing it in and out of the pen, it's not going to really do you any harm. You don't want to soak your stainless steel nib or soak your whole pen in pure bleach for hours, okay? That you don't want to do. You want to be careful. Bleach is a fairly aggressive chemical, as is pure ammonia. It's not even pure ammonia. If you're talking like household ammonia or household bleach, those are like maybe 5% dilution, right? Just as they are. They're mostly water with some ammonia or some bleach in them. You never want to mix ammonia and bleach. Please don't do that. Hopefully you know that already, but do not mix ammonia and bleach. It makes a noxious gas that can kill you, so please don't do that. Bleach in dilution, if you do about a 10% dilution, should be pretty good. It'll cut through that Bay State Blue and clean it up really nicely. And if you're just kind of flushing it in and out of the pen, and then you just flush it with clean water, or maybe water with a little dish soap after that to help get all that bleach out of there, then it's going to work really great for you. Stephen Brown, SBRE Brown on YouTube, has a really good video about cleaning Bay State Blue. Really good. He actually takes, I think it's an Ahab, and literally soaks the entire pen in Bay State Blue to stain it a blue color intentionally. And then he cuts through it with bleach at the end, and the thing looks brand new. So really an extreme demonstration of how to clean Bay State Blue off your pen. So it works really well. He did a good job with that. Free me a second. Whew. Virginia V on Facebook. I'm holding my breath waiting for the Noodlers Naponsit. Am I going to turn blue? I've been waiting for the Noodlers Naponsit for 3.5 years. So yeah, please don't hold your breath. I'm told it's close. It's really close. I believe that like the Noodlers distributor is waiting for it. I don't know what the holdup is, but Nathan wants to make sure that these pens are fantastic before they go out, and rightfully so, especially this particular pen because it's been so long in development. And I don't know how many of these things he has. It's probably not that many, so he probably wants to check every one and make sure that it's good before he releases them. So it has been like slowly working its way up down the chain, right? So it will be here soon, whether that means it arrives this afternoon in my office. It could be. Probably it's going to be another couple of weeks, maybe a month, maybe 2 months. I honestly have no idea. I apologize for not having more specific information than that, but that's all I got. So all I can guarantee is that we're going to have some kind of publicity around it before it actually gets here. So it's not just going to be a surprise, like, hey, it's available now. Oh, it's gone. Oh, darn it. I didn't check my email today, so it's gone now. I'm going to try not to do that to you, okay? I'm going to try and give you as much of a heads up as I can. Oh, man, I can tell my voice is, like, degrading quickly through this Q&A. Brian H. on Facebook said, Star Trek fans are commonly referred to as Trekkies or Trekkers. Doctor Who fans are commonly referred to as Whovians. Is there such a nickname for those of us who use fountain pens for almost everything? Also, do you plan on adding a music nib to your Goulet nib line anytime soon? So regarding the name, I really don't know if there is a specific like kind of catchy name for fountain pen folks. I feel like if there was, I would be using it already. Maybe I need to come up with something. I don't know. If you have any good ideas, just post it in the comments. Maybe I'll give that one some thought. I don't have anything like magical that's coming off the top of my head. I'm usually pretty good with like catchy little names, but I don't have anything right now. And then you're asking me about music nib to the Goulet nib line anytime soon. I'll tell you a dirty little secret about music nibs, modern music nibs. Essentially, they're stub nibs. That's about it. You know, like Sailor's music nib is literally just a stub nib. There's nothing that I know that's that different. I have one. There's nothing I know that's that different about it than a stub nib. Platinum's music nib has 3 tines, so it's got 2 slits, so it writes wetter because of that. Noodler's, I imagine that's where a lot of this music nib conversation is coming from recently because of the Nippon sit that's going to be coming with a music nib. It's a flexible music nib, so it's going to go from a pretty thin line to an extremely broad line. That's what's so exciting about this particular one. But that, I've never heard of another flexible music nib before the Noodlers. I'm sure somewhere throughout fountain pen history there's something out there. I'm no pen historian, so I don't know. But we already have a Goulet 1.1 and a 1.5 stub nib. So no, we're not going to be adding a music nib. It's not something that Yovo offers. So it would be really, really impractical for us to go and source that out. Matthew F. on Facebook, what's your favorite demonstrator and why? I've really got a hankering for a TWSBI 580, but maybe I should go for something else. And for the sake of the question, let's act like price isn't an issue. Ha! Well, that opens up some doors. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, the 580, that's pretty awesome. You know, for what you're getting for that pen, it's really tough to beat, honestly. Piston filling, nib swapping, you know, self-servicing pen for $50. It's just really tough to beat. There's really not much else that is as feature-packed as that pen. Packaging is great, you know, all that. The Pilot Custom 74, I love that pen. It's definitely more expensive than the 580, no question about it. It's got a gold nib, writes great. That, you know, I like the blue one personally a little better, but they got a clear, and it's a nice pen too. The TWSBI VAC 700 is another one. They got the mini and they've got the classic. You know, the classic is not a demonstrator, but the mini is. So those would be contenders as well. Those are in that same kind of price range as the 580. VAC 700 is a little bit different pen than the other ones. It's a vacuum filling pen. So that one's kind of neat. If you've never used a vacuum filling pen, it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. So that would be worth checking out. The Platinum Nice is another one that has kind of recently come out. They also have the Platinum Cool, which has a clear version as well. 2 completely different pens there that I just totally switch gears on. But Platinum Cool is like a $40 steel nib pen. It's actually got a little bit of softness to the nib. You can get a little bit of line variation. I wouldn't go nuts with it, but it's possible. And then the Platinum Nice is that new pen from Platinum that just came out. It's $200, so it's a little bit up there, but really nice pen. Looks great. The texture is interesting. It's I haven't shot a video specifically on the Nice yet, but it's different feeling than some of the other ones. It's got this frosty kind of color to it, kind of like the sandy beaches of Nice, but it feels different than the other ones. So that's weirded some people out a little bit. Gotten some returns on those pens just because the way they feel. So it's not anything wrong. It's just purely a preference thing. But you never know. That's one downfall of selling fountain pens on the internet. You just don't get to touch it. So, but we're flexible with that kind of thing. And then, you know, what the heck? If you're talking demonstrators, Pelican M1000, they did a demonstrator. I'm not sure if they still have it available or not. I don't deal a whole lot with the M1000s. I can special order them. I'm a Pelican dealer, so I can get them, but I don't carry them regularly. Those are fantastic pens. I mean, the nib on the M1000 is unreal. It's close to $1,000 list price, but it's a pretty cool pen. So there you go. That is the most expensive demonstrator pen that I can think of. There's probably more expensive pens out there. But as far as like true demonstrators, that would be the one. So, Dominick D on Facebook said, that question I had last time about you possibly selling your own handles for wax seals. I know it isn't fountain pen related per se, but I'd still love to hear your opinion on it. Okay, so Dominick, I'm not sure everybody understands the question you asked, and that's all right. So you're asking, about selling wax seal handles. So I did that when I was getting out of fountain pen turning. I was carrying paper and ink and wax stuff, and I still had all my tools in my workshop and everything set up. I got into making custom wax seal handles using some of the exotic woods that I was using for the pens. Seemed really great. I enjoyed making them. They were gorgeous. I loved doing it. But the growth of the business ended up taking over the rest of the workshop to the point where I couldn't practically make them anymore. So down the road, it would be a lot of fun, personally, just a lot of fun for me. As a business case, I'm not sure I could really justify my time and the amount of time it takes to make those things as being a smart business move. But as a personal enjoyment hobby thing down the road, I could see picking it up again just because I feel like doing it. I'd probably have to sell them at like $200 a pop to even have it make sense if I was going to actually try to sell them. I'm just kidding. I wouldn't do that. But it's my time is so precious these days. I've got 2 young kids. I'm trying to keep myself fit. I wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning and ride my bike to keep fit, and just like it's just crazy. So I really don't have a hobby right now, and so that would be really kind of cool to do that again one day. But it's not going to happen for a while, realistically. Tim K on Facebook. This might be hard to answer. Does scented ink taste like it smells? Yuck. No, I doubt it. I haven't actually tasted it. I definitely would not recommend that you try. But yeah, ink is basically nothing but water and chemicals, dyes and biocides and things like that. It's really not intended for human consumption. I know they don't come with any disclaimers or anything on the bottle, mainly because it's not a product that's advertised for consumption. So I would say that you should not intentionally try, but should you happen to accidentally spill some in your mouth, I'd love to hear what you think about how it tastes. Eric L on Facebook, just bought a Schaefer 300 from you guys. Love the size and weight. Good pen. What other pens would be comparable dimension and especially heft-wise? Well, I'm a fan of the 300. I've been a fan of that for a while. Actually, that was one of the earlier pens that we carried here at Goulet, and then we dropped it, and then we picked it up again. So, we've had a bit of a history with the 300. It just didn't sell that well before. I personally liked the pen, so I wanted to carry it, and it just didn't sell that well, so we cut it out very early on in our business, and then we picked it up again because I liked it, and I just said, darn, I just want to carry it. And it's been doing okay now. So that pen is about 45 grams. So it's definitely on the heavier side. It depends which pen you're looking at too. The acrylic, version that, actually I don't even think they have those anymore, but I have some of the older acrylic versions. Those are a little lighter, but the newer ones now, 45 grams, they're heavier. 45 grams is pretty heavy for a pen. So I looked at some other heavier, larger metal pens, right? The Pilot Metal Falcon, I thought that's pretty big, that's pretty heavy. That pen's actually only 33 grams. So when you compare 45 to 33, that's like a quarter lighter than the 300. So Pilot Metal Falcon, possibly, but that's really kind of a different pen. It's got a soft nib on it and all that. So maybe that's not the best comparison. But anyway, the Jinhao 159, that one's a very big pen, arguably bigger than the 300. It's 50 grams, so it's slightly heavier, but it would feel fairly comparable. So that would be one. It's only like $12. So that would definitely be one to consider. And the Jinhao X750, that one's 36 grams. So that one's going to be a little bit lighter, but it's going to be comparable in size about to the Schaefer 300. Lamy Studio, that's a good pen. I like that one too. That one's actually only 31 grams. Some of these, when I feel them in my hand, I don't feel they're that different sometimes, but then when I look up the actual weight, because we weigh every single pen, the cap, the body separately, all that. We do all that here in-house. That's not something that's supplied to us from the manufacturers. We have to do that for every single pen. We use calipers and we measure all different dimensions and stuff. And so once you actually see what the numbers are, wow, 31 grams versus 45, that's almost a third lighter than the 300. So the Lamy Studio, it's definitely lighter, but it's fairly comparable in size. I do like that pen. Monteverde and Vincia, that pen, it's got a little bit different shape to it, but it's definitely still in there too. That one's 40 grams, so that one's going to be somewhat comparable. And then TWSBI VAC 700, that one's definitely a big pen, but it's 32 grams. So again, that one's kind of in the boat with the Lamy Studio. It's not as heavy. Mainly, you have to have a pen that's made out of a pretty hefty metal to be that hefty. Okay. Robert R. on Facebook said, I love the look of the Platinum Maki-e pens. Is it possible that over time and by posting the lid on top whilst writing that beautiful images will rub off? It's possible, but I don't think it's very likely. I guess you could risk that with kind of any pen, like having the finish kind of rub off over time. I've never personally heard of that being an issue. You know, they use lacquer over top of the Maki-e designs. It's pretty durable. So I can't say it's not a possibility that it wouldn't happen, but I haven't heard of that ever being an issue with it. So that's about all I can say about that. There is a cap insert that I don't actually have that pen with me. It's amazing I don't have that pen lying out like I have every other pen I've talked about. I've just happened to have laying out. That one, it does have an insert on the cap that grabs onto the pen. So it's not actually like a metal part of the cap that's grabbing onto the body of that pen. So it is like a kind of a softer plastic that's grabbing onto that body. So the risk of it scratching and getting damaged and stuff is much lower than perhaps some other pen designs might be. All right, and last question I have here is Linda D on Facebook. So she says, the Quo Vadis site just announced that the new style Habanas are now available in ivory and white. Will Goulet start carrying the white as well? I don't know exactly what it is that you're looking at, Linda, but I looked on their site. I contacted our Quo Vadis, you know, the manufacturer actually, because Quo Vadis uses Clairefontaine paper, but they actually manufacture the Habanas in the U.S., at least the ones that come in the U.S. I imagine they may. I'm not sure if all of the Habanas are made in the U.S. or whether it's just the ones that are sold in North America, but I know that they are made there, right there in Hamburg, New York. So I contacted the guy who like heads up the department there, and he said there's definitely no white paper that's made in the Habanas anymore. It's actually been a number of years since they've made any. They still have some old stock from several years ago that might be being advertised on their site, and it's just kind of hanging around. But I looked into that, and it's kind of like the least popular colors and sizes. So while technically it's feasible to still get some of those white paper Habanas, it's only in like the absolute least popular options that have taken 3.5 years to clear out. So we haven't carried them regularly because it's only the least popular ones that are left. And it's just going to be so confusing for everybody. Like, we didn't think that they would last this long. When we heard they were discontinued, we kind of cleared out all the stock we had once the new ones came out. And we were like, all right, well, since the white ones are being discontinued, we're just going to stop offering them, because otherwise it would be this kind of trickling thing. And then how would you tell the difference between white and ivory easily and stuff like that? And if the notebooks looked exactly the same, it would be hard, it'd be confusing. So we just said, you know what, we're going to do a clean cut over. That was a number of years ago. I didn't even look on the blog post exactly when that was, but I did a blog post about it, and everybody was up in arms about it when it happened, actually. But so that's kind of the situation there. So you're not looking at new notebooks that are coming with white paper. You're looking at rather old ones that are still having it. Okay. So that pretty much covers it for this week. Next week, I'm going to do another open forum, so I'll just kind of be taking more questions. I don't even really need more questions. I got enough questions. I got a backlog of like 70 questions. I'm not going to lie to you. But even still, I like having a lot of questions because it allows me to kind of stack things up based on what I feel is relevant kind of at the time, and I like doing that. So, you know, keep asking me the questions you have. I'm really sorry if you keep asking and I just don't get you your proper questions. So I apologize for that, but I'm doing the best I can. I answer them as best I can every week, and hopefully I keep it relevant and somewhat entertaining So that's about it. If you do have questions, you can post it in the comments on YouTube or on Ink Nouveau. You can email me at gouletqa@gouletpens.com. You can hashtag gouletqa on Twitter, or you can ask on Facebook once we post like early next week and ask for questions. So if you, I hope you've enjoyed this episode here. I know it's been a little kooky with some of the technical issues I've had, but you know, that's all right. We still got it out. I'm glad to be able to keep doing this. I'm still enjoying doing the Q&A thing, and I think you guys are too, so I'm really glad for that. So have a wonderful weekend, have a wonderful rest of your week, and make sure you are writing on.